to the Wellness Show. I'm Dr. Keisha Christian, your host. So glad that you've tuned in for today's episode. We continue on our journey in talking about orthotics and prosthetics. And today, we've invited a special guest from Level 4 Orthotics and Prosthetics to share with us about that very topic, orthotics and prosthetics. And most keenly, we're going to talk about prosthetics today. So without further ado, I introduce to you and welcome David Kelly. David, so glad that you've joined us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And you're an orthotist and a prosthetist, and I know that you have so much knowledge in this field, and we're so glad that you've joined us today to share with all of us.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
Yes. So share with us your motivation and passion in becoming an orthotist and a prosthetist.
You know, actually I started out in this field by accident, to be honest. My original degree was a business degree.
Huh, interesting.
But I had stopped to help a friend at one point, kind of build his lab, stayed on as a technician, and went from there. You know, the technician is the guy in the back who's actually doing all the dirty work. I found I enjoyed it. It's an interesting career because a lot of it's a craft. It's something where you're building it from scratch. And there's definitely the science and the philosophy behind it, but when you start from the bottom, you learn the craft side, and then after about 3 years of working both the prosthetics and orthotic side of it, I eventually decided to go back to school. So the wife and I, we took the kids, moved to Minnesota for 2 years to go to practitioner school. And after that, ended up in Seattle for the next 15. So it's been an interesting trip, and now I'm here in North Carolina, but had a chance to work in the many different areas in the country, which there's a lot of endemic philosophies as far as how to deal with both on the orthotic and the prosthetic side. Yes. So it's interesting to see it from different points of view, and you know, try and incorporate that into my daily practice, the different experiences. But you know, I originally started out in pediatrics. So I did a lot of pediatric bracing. I was working up in DC, and you really learned, I think that's where it turned the corner from being the craftsman in the back to actually being the practitioner, is when you started working actually straight with patients, finding the issues. You know, there's a lot of biomechanical issues that we have to work around, especially on the bracing side. So learning how all that works. Then after school, I pretty much dove a lot more into the prosthetic side, but it's been an interesting journey. I
can imagine, because you know, with those devices, one size doesn't always fit all, you know, so you do have to make modifications and adjustments for each individual person. So very interesting. So you've had experience in both, is just honing in that craft, and then also the interaction with, of course, the patients, and of course, physical therapists, as we work so well together as a team, in ensuring that the patient does have a quality of life with the assistance of both the physical therapist and, of course, your skills and products and services as well.
Well, I think that's, you know, one of the important roles, especially on the prosthetic side as a practitioner, is that I'm ultimately the first person these patients meet who can tell them what happens after the amputation.
Sure.
You know, your doctor can say you'll be fine, you'll get a leg, you'll move on. The therapist can fill in a few of the blanks.
Sure.
But I'm the first one who can really sit down and explain the nuts and bolts. Also, I spend a lot of time working with the family. That's something that we don't really think about a whole lot, is that, you know, that spouse or that parent or children, whoever's involved in their daily activity, they a lot of times have more questions than the patient, especially during those pre-amputation counseling or post-amputation counseling. You know, so it's important on my aspect to make sure that not only the patient knows what's going on and what to expect, but also what the family can do and what they can expect along the way.
Absolutely, and I think it's so intriguing that here at Level 4 Orthotics and Prosthetics, you have 24 care, correct? Is that you provide service 24 hours a day.
Right. You know, we have our regular hours where we prefer to see patients, but you know, it's something that unfortunately things do happen on the weekends in the middle of the night. You know, whether it be an amputee or somebody embracing, either way, the answer should not be get a wheelchair, we'll see you Monday.
Sure.
you have to deal with the problem as it is, because this is people's lives.
Absolutely, and that's great that you take that in consideration, that it is people's lives, and you're there to help and care for them at their need, their point of need, so that's great. So share with us your specialties and product expertise within Level 4.
Right. Well, I was brought to Level 4 for the prosthetics, particularly lower extremity prosthetics, which is the bulk of the business.
Right.
We do have some specialists in the company who do more of the uppers, so arms and shoulders and such. But mine is really feet, knees, hips.
What are the most common that you see?
Most common is baloney prosthetics. By far, the population is much higher. But what I do, there's a lot of changes that happened here in baloney prosthetics that make it a lot more interesting. The big move, actually, may I?
Sure, absolutely.
Just thought we'd bring in a little bit of sample of what a leg looks like. Good time to bring it in.
Yes.
This is a baloney prosthesis. It is basically a prosthesis consists of a few components. Number one thing is a socket. If you think about it, that's really my job. That's 90% of the job is this socket. This is the interface between the patient and the rest of the componentry. So if it doesn't fit correctly, if it's not comfortable, if it doesn't function properly, then the rest of it really doesn't matter a whole lot. So really my main focus is the socket. After that, we do not build the components. There are companies that build that, but as practitioners, we combine these, order the right components for the patient, and combine them onto the leg. There's a lot of different feet. There's, if you go above the knee, there's a lot of different knees that can be incorporated. But either way, the components we try to customize them to the patient and what the patient's needs are.
Sure.
But with a typical baloney, this is probably the most common that you're going to find. Socket, foot, and to keep it on, the third component that involved in any prosthesis is suspension. We need to keep it on the patient. In the old days, we used to use straps and belts and sleeves, but and this has been around probably 20 years.
Yes.
With these sleeves or better, but it's gone from something that was really only used for a small portion to, we've got so many different options nowadays with silicons and how tacky they are, how some with vitamin E, different things for the skin to protect it. But patient would roll this onto their residual limb, step in, and there's a lock in the bottom, and it suspends. This is by far the most common suspension system you'll see in the US, and the most secure, in that this is the one system that you could literally hang yourself upside down by the prosthesis and you won't come out.
Right.
It's very secure and thus very common nowadays. Where you're seeing the moves in the future are more towards elevated vacuum. And elevated vacuum has also been around for probably 10 years, but it's gone through a lot of generations and reinvented itself to where now we've got 3-4 systems that you can either use a mechanical or electrical pump that would fit in here below the socket, and it would actually pull air out of the socket itself. So it in essence sucks you into it.
Yes, so it's a better fit.
It can be a much better fit, but more importantly, there's no movement. In anything like this, you've got a certain amount of movement inside the sockets. With the vacuum, it's locked to you, and what that translates to is better proprioception, so knowing where your foot is in space, because there's no slack. The other thing that we found is that it actually is the only system that improves blood flow. If you think about it from a prosthetic standpoint, you've got pressure in certain areas that there's no way to avoid including that blood flow to a degree. But with suction, we're actually seeing improved blood flow into the limb. And in some cases, we've used it to heal ulcers and other things, almost like a back, I should say.
Yes.
Type and tell, you're using elevated vacuum to increase the blood flow into an area when we're seeing legs heal that otherwise we might have been waiting 6-8 weeks for something, a slow healer. So it's very interesting the direction it's going.
So it accelerates the healing process.
Exactly.
Oh, excellent.
And protects them in the future as their day-to-day
Sure.
from any little blisters becoming an issue.
Absolutely. And
So
it enhances the comfort as well. And so whether you are doing just general walking or a little bit more of an athletic activity, it gives you more comfort.
Exactly. And it can be used below or above the knee. In most of these patients, if you think about it, most of the patients in the U.S. are amputees or diabetics, 70%. That's what leads to an amputation. So their health and their activity level for most of these is not, they're not going to be running anyway, so it's not a high level activity. But they're functional ambulators. There are people that want to get out in the community, they want to go to church, they want to go to the grocery store, they want to do this. So anything we can do, like the vacuum or other systems that improve their ability to do such, the better. You know, and really, for a below knee amputee, it's reasonable to expect that you'll get back very close to that same function level you were at before the foot started giving you a problem. That's our goal, is to get you back up. So again, if you go get your own groceries, that's what we want. That's what we're striving towards. So, and that's why we're working with the therapist so much, is to try and get to that common goal.
Yes, we surely want everyone to live a life of wellness and to regain that functional mobility, whether it's in their home and or in the community, and or sports-related activity. So we want people to have a quality life. More and more people are active in the community, and that's a good thing.
Exactly. You know, it's not, the idea isn't just to stick a leg on them and have them around. These people, whether they be golfers or just, again, shoppers, churchgoers, whatever they want to do, we're trying to design a leg that will keep them moving in the direction they want to be moving.
Yes, absolutely. And so there have been such vast advancements in technology with prostheses. Share with us some of the other technology that's out there for prostheses.
Well, in prosthetics, there's a lot of, when I go back to the idea of the socket design, there's been a lot of thoughts over the years. You know, you go back to really the 1970s when really the first thought in America, you know, it changed to what's life like after an amputation, not just getting through the amputation. So starting from the surgeons themselves, improving their techniques, but then from socket design. A socket, you cannot bear weight in line like you do in a body. Typically, the weight goes through the bony structure straight to the foot. Now, after an amputation, you can't bear the weight on the bottom. So we have to learn to squeeze, take that pressure elsewhere, usually by compression around the sides. That, going back to our occluding blood flow and function, over the years there's been a lot of changes in the shapes. You know, in the 70s was the first time they came up with some non-bucket style sockets. And since then you've seen innovations from Europe, innovations in the US, South Africa, all over, and this information continues to combine. Again, suction being one of the big things, but also from a hardware standpoint, the computer-assisted knees. And those, there's a host of reasons why they improve function and energy consumption. But really, in my mind, the single biggest thing is stumble recovery. There's a feature in these computers, they recognize where you are in your gait cycle and what should be happening. Should the knee be bending? Should the knee be stiff? What's the appropriate function at that point? What the stumble recovery does is, the worst thing for an amputee, an above knee amputee, to do is to land with their knee bent. In conventional knees, that meant you were going to the ground before you knew what was happening. But now with these computer knees, they actually recognize that you've altered your gait cycle, and they go into a lock mode. Which doesn't mean, unfortunately, doesn't mean you're not going to hit the ground, but it gives you a chance. And that same function can be used, it gives you a lot better control. So combine that with the ability to walk step over step down stairs, down ramps, the security that you get. It's huge what's happening with the knees, and now they're starting to come up with feet that adjust as well. So there's big advances that are coming out, and more, probably just as important as those knees have been around long enough that now Medicare, Medicaid, private insurance are actually starting to pay for these. They used to be a very large financial, burden. A knee that costs $20,000 is not something
Right.
that most of us have in our checkbook. But now that it's been around long enough, it's no longer considered experimental by most carriers, and thus more patients can take advantage of it.
Excellent. And the function part is great. The function, the control, and the ability to mobilize throughout the home, the community as well, but also cosmetically. There's been a lot of new advances in cosmesis of
Right.
the prostheses.
Yes, and in most cases I guess you could think of it this. You could break up your average amputee into one of three types. Most prefer some sort of cover. It's not so much that you're trying to hide it, you just don't want the leg to stand out.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll do foam covers to kind of mimic the shape of your other leg. We can use nylon or skins. There's a lot of silicone skins and stuff out there to try and match it as closely as possible. And, to a large degree, it won't stand out under pants or under a skirt or something like this.
Yes.
There's two other types of amputees you're seeing out there nowadays, and a lot of them are they just don't care. A cover is just they've got an amputation, they're fine with it, they're
Right.
moving forward, and they don't want to mess with covers and the
Sure.
maintenance. So typically you might do a socket that would be just a black carbon, something like this, that we're replacing this clear one with a carbon socket.
Okay.
It looks nice in today's age, it's actually kind of sporty, and it's just simple.
Yes.
But then there's a third group that I always enjoy. They're, I guess, the exhibitionists, for lack of a better term. You can take any material, whether any cloth, if you would like your shirt to be the color, we can impregnate that into the socket. So I've done everything from rattlesnake legs to Betty Boop
Interesting.
to Harley Davidson,
Yes.
Marine Corps legs. There's so many things that a lot of people are now, the mentality has changed in the general public that people are actually showing off their legs.
Yes.
So, which is a lot of fun.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. That's good. So you aim to please.
Exactly.
For everyone, there is a prosthesis for you if you need it.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
that's great to know. So share with us about other assistive devices that you have that enables people to walk, such as people who are paraplegic and aren't able to naturally walk.
Well, here at level 4, we do the full range of prosthetic or orthotics, from simple arch supports up through spinal and what's called an RGO. An RGO is short for reciprocating gait orthosis. It's a brace that includes both the legs all the way through the hip and sometimes the lower spine. And what it does is the brace forces you to reciprocate in your gait. In other words, if you extend one leg, it'll force the other one together. So a patient can learn to ambulate without using any musculature in the lower body. Originally, this was designed for pediatrics, because the thought was as the body weight as we get bigger and heavier, we wouldn't have the energy to actually be able to use RGO. Though about, I don't know, about 10 years ago I was in Seattle and I had a 30-year-old paraplegic come to me asking if I could do this type of brace for him. And he had done some research, and I guess there have been some studies done in Europe where they're starting to use it for adults. So having had the experience, I decided to go ahead and give it a try. And actually the results have been quite interesting, because we now have better joints, better materials, that actually, though very few paraplegics with this brace can learn to be true community ambulators, there are those stars that you'll see that'll use forearm crutches and walk into a mall. But I think more importantly, it's just the therapeutic aspect. Most people, the energy expenditure is high. It's something like 120, 130% increase. So for most, again, they're not going to be doing daily, going to the fair or the mall or something. But just the advantages of being able to get home, get stretched out, get vertical for the hours. What some patients will either lie in bed to stretch or maybe have a standing frame where they're stuck in a room. Now you've got people who can get out of their
Yes.
bedroom. They can get, even if it's just around the house for a couple hours, the both physical and mental, psychological
Absolutely.
aspects, you know, the benefits are huge.
It's monumental because it's also preventative, you know, from pressure
Exactly.
sores as well, getting
Exactly.
contractures, and so it's,
You know,
it's great.
The urinary tract, everything benefits from it. So it's been a lot of fun. I really started the program in Seattle, where this one individual came to me, but then I had several others. A guy that wanted to go to Europe, and problem is they're not very ADA compliant. He actually came to me, we talked about it, we built him a brace that allowed him to get out of his wheelchair and walk again. It was limited,
Sure.
but he could walk into his hotel, he could walk into his cafe and get down, get back up, and get back to his chair.
Excellent.
So it's all about just increasing your area that you know, your functional area. So anything we can do to get people up and out of a chair is a big thing. But even just out of their house as much as possible. Increase your surroundings.
Absolutely, and that's important. Having that quality of life is so important, and having wellness is essential for everyone. So that's great. And you touched a little bit about various orthotics, low extremity orthotics that you have. Share with us some of the different braces that you provide here at Level 4.
Well, you know, the majority of what we do is custom, although we do some off-the-shelf knee braces. But you know, orthotics is the business of bracing around an existing structure. So in a lot of ways, they say prosthetics is easier because the problems have usually been removed.
Sure.
And you're filling a void. But in orthotics, you're working around malfunctioning body part, the way to put it. So whether we do simple foot orthotics, which we don't do a ton of those, but you know, there's a need, especially on the diabetic issue or diabetic side, of protecting the feet, so they don't see me for the leg. But we also do anything that's involved around the ankle, the knee, the hip, and the lower spine that we brace for.
Yes.
So, you know, right now the big move is from long leg braces are things called SCOs, the stance control orthotics. There's a lot of it used to be if you needed to cross the knee, the problem was you were either lock up the knee, so you walked with a stiff leg, or you had to have enough control to use a free knee.
Right.
Now they've got knees that actually have locks built in, so almost like that computerized knee, when your heel hits the ground in a step, it'll lock, but then it knows when you're ready to swing through and opens it up, which again decreases energy expenditure and just general comfort for the patient. So
I love the advances in technology.
it's interesting how it goes in spurts, but you know, and then unfortunately it takes a while to work out the bugs.
It does.
But it's interesting where they're going, and
Absolutely.
now we're kind of moving towards that. Let's face it, it's a cell phone generation. People
Yes.
are used to plugging things in, where, you know, 10, 15 years ago, really the idea of having electronic prosthesis, something you had to plug in every day,
Right.
for a lot of people it's like, no,
Right.
I don't want to deal with that. But now we're getting to the point where it's commonplace. So what that opens up as far as componentry and what they can do for you is big.
Yes. Share with us a memorable experience. I know you've shared with us so many other experiences that you've had with various patients, but share with us one of the most memorable experiences that you've had in restoring, help to restore and regain function, someone able to walk again, as well as quality of life.
You know, yeah, there's a lot of stories that you can go into, but I think what sticks in my mind the most is actually an 80-year-old gentleman I originally saw in the hospital right after his amputation. Actually very quiet, a little on the depressed side. You know, not a very closed individual at the time. And this is where I learned to deal with the family. You know, and really he was the quiet one, but I met his wife, who was very agitated, she was not in a good place, she was angry. And just the entire scenario, because unfortunately for a lot of amputees, it isn't something when we go to the dieback that you see coming.
Right.
You might you might know it's out there and you're having a problem, but a lot of times it's, you go to see your doctor and they say, okay, well, it's time, and you're checked in the hospital that day. So a lot of these people are, yeah, they're confused, they're angry, there's a lot of things going on, but I spent a good hour that first day just talking to the wife and explaining, you know, what was happening, and her attitude changed 180 degrees. Just because I was the first person who actually sat down and talked to her. In the end, this 82-year-old guy that there was question whether or not he'd be up and about at all, especially with his, just from his psyche at the time, within 6 months he's back doing ballroom dancing, which is the thing. They travel with their RV, they, I guess, go to Brainerd, is their scheduled thing every year. And it you know, it's nothing fancy. He didn't become a superstar. He didn't, you know, anything else. He was just a normal guy. But just to see the family, how and him, how the attitudes changed from somebody that really was a question whether he was going to be an ambulator to now he's doing everything he was doing before and then some. So,
he regained his quality of life.
Exactly.
And
it was kind of fun to watch.
Yes, absolutely. And you know, you talked about just spending the time, you know, with family and sharing with them what to expect and what the process is. That is very important because, you know, it demolishes the fears that you may have. This is a major change, but yet it can be restored, you know, and so providing that information and education, I can imagine, meant a lot to his spouse and just calm their minds that, you know what, this is not the end. You know, there's life after either an orthotic or a prostheses. There is life after that, and you make it happen here at level 4. Orthotics and Prosthetics, and we're so thankful that you're here.
Oh, thank you.
Definitely. So, David, you've been just a pleasure, someone to talk to about orthotics and prosthetics and sharing the various components that you have and some of the stories that you have, and, you know, renewing someone's life and sharing your expertise with them and getting them up and functional and walking, and so that they can live a life of wellness as well. So thank you so much for joining us today.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you. We appreciate your expertise and your knowledge base that you have in this particular field. And we're so glad that you're here in Cary and you're here to stay. So again, we've continued on our discussion of orthotics and prosthetics. And it's such a great field, great components and devices that we offer the community. Level 4 is wonderful. Their staff are great, very caring, and they provide their expertise and ensure that you're happy and you have the devices that you need so that you can regain, again, a quality of life and wellness in your life. So thank you for joining us once again on the Wellness Show. As always, we wish you well.